and then the person who makes the initial report or some does not want to continue to press charges. Does someone have to actually press charges if a report is made?
Definitely. Once a report is made, and for the matter to reach to the court, the victim or the survivor must provide a statement. The scene must be visited. Exhibits must be collected. So a level of cooperation on the side of the victim is very, very critical.
Going back to that scenario that you described earlier on, where persons are making the initial report but don't necessarily want to end the relationship, how often would you say that's happening in Trinidad and Tobago from your reports?
That is happening a lot. It is happening a lot. Um, you see, a victim or survivor loves the perpetrator. Eh? They love the perpetrator. Sometimes the perpetrator may be the sole breadwinner. This is someone who, you got into a relationship with in the beginning, and you think you would have been living happily ever after. And sometimes you may see the violence, but you tell yourself it's temporary. Yeah? And you tell yourself that the person would change. But without help and assistance, that person cannot change. Things get worse in the relationship, from my experience.
Is it that in the heat of the argument, they're going to say, all right, they're going to call the police, they're going to call the police. They call the police arrives, and then when everything quiets down, they don't want to press. But is the TTPS doing any sort of follow-ups?
Yes, yes, yes. With the advent of the gender-based violence unit in 2020, one of the things that I implemented into the unit is a register that we call the welfare register. Because let me tell you something, within the TTPS, you see follow-up. Follow-up is a serious issue that the commissioner, Mr. Jacob, and his executive and the entire TTPS, they speak about a lot in meetings. That follow-up action is critical. So when a report of a DV is made, that's not the end all. We will walk that victim through the entire process, and if you do not follow through with the prosecution, from time to time, the officers would make visits at your home just to ensure, for example, if protection orders are in effect, to ensure that parties are abiding, by the rules of the protection orders and so forth, and that persons are keeping the peace, because sometimes we want both parties to keep the peace at times.
ASP Guy James, just walk me through this legally. So unless the person commits to making a charge, to filing a charge, the police are stumped there. What if the person, in filing the initial report, the police sees that there has been evidence of abuse, even if the person doesn't want to make a charge? Is the police able to move forward with charging that person some physical mark of violence, etc., or are they still constrained in that regard?
We are constrained. We must get a written statement from you with the accounting with the process or the scenario that happened, that John Brown, around so and so time, I was at home in the kitchen and, this happened, and he gave me 2 slaps to my face, or he choked me. We have to have that written in a document and signed by the victim or survivor.
So
And
in
you
the
must
absence
have
of that, you
other,
can lay no charges.
you can lay no charges. You
Richard has
can lay
joined
no
us.
charges.
Yeah. Yeah, good morning. I mean, I'm just, the issue of domestic violence is such a reoccurring blotch on the social landscape of Trinidad and Tobago. And it seems as if no matter what systems the state puts in place, it seems that I don't know how much of a dent we are making, and I don't know if you have that kind of data. That is it that domestic violence cases that end in death are less? Are they lessening every year percentile wise, or is it just are averaging around the same figure every year?
Well, one thing I must say, what was observed in 2021 is that, and I think I would give credit to the TTPS with the gender-based violence unit and the new approach. we had a decrease, a 50% thereabout decrease in intimate partner violence homicides. So that decrease says something. It says that something is happening. But you see, when it comes to DV, when it comes to domestic violence, the police cannot do it alone. You must have a sort of multi-sectorial approach, right? We had the laws changing. That really, to me, that assisted in somewhat. So we cannot just throw our hands up in the air and give up. We just have to look for new ideas, new procedures, new policies to bring into Trinidad and Tobago so that, we could create that atmosphere where victims and survivors feel comfortable coming forward and making reports. Because you see, DV, persons think that is something that happens behind closed doors. And I'm pleading to the public, if you have a relative or a friend who's going through a domestic situation and that person developed the courage to come and tell you something, believe that person. Believe that person and support that person. Don't just tell the person, here's what, you see, that is a private business. I'm not getting involved. Believe that person and carry that person to seek help.
I want to talk about the issue of protection orders, ASP Guy. And there's some conversation recently because people have seen protection orders not achieve the objectives intended, that they may not be as effective. Do you think the protection order system is working in Trinidad and Tobago? And if you don't, what do you think can be done to make it more effective or more or protect women more effectively? Or men?
I love that question, Mr. Richards. Let me tell you something. Protection orders are there, and I'm saying persons need to use it. I think it's very effective, right? Because you see, once you have protection orders in effect and you have enforcement is a sort of deterrent. Yes, it's a piece of paper, but if the perpetrator breaches the protection order and a report is made and law enforcement enforces the law, conduct investigation, and effect charges where evidence is, that will act as a sort of deterrent. Don't just have the protection order, and when things start to get back nice, you don't want to make reports if the person breaches the order. We have had recently where persons were, the court ordered for persons to be fitted with the electronic monitoring device, and I think that is excellent. We have to use everything that is available to us in Trinidad and Tobago.
They actually use that. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, because that was a question that I had coming up. What was the status of that? So orders have been made for its use.
Yes, we had one about a couple of weeks ago in the eastern part of Trinidad, in the Northern Division, where perpetrator for bail purposes, the magistrate, and I find that was so excellent. I was so excited. The officers in gender base was really excited as well too, and the victim is we spoke to the victim last week, and the victim is happy. The victim feels comfortable because with that electronic monitoring device, if the perpetrator comes into a particular distance of you, or let us say you are in Trinity Mall, the device is going to go off, so you would know, here's what, this gentleman or this woman is very close by. You understand? So the electronic monitoring device is an excellent tool.
So the alleged victim, the victim, because it's not alleged at that stage, the victim will have a device on him or her, maybe their cell phone, that will indicate that the person with the device is close by, is within proximity.
Right. Both parties, the victim, survivor, as well as the perpetrator, is fitted with the device. You must have a level of consent from the victim once the order is made, right?
Okay.
And both parties are fitted with the device. And let me tell you something, that triggers something at the police. The police and all will be notified, right? So the police will know both parties' location. You understand?
Okay.
And if something is
Right.
happening, the police can respond.
Because that was my next question. Where is it being monitored? Are all police stations have the capacity to monitor if those devices are ordered by respective district courts, or is it going to one control center?
Yes, it's one control center, and then it will be, let us say there's an emergency or something, the station district involved will be notified, the patrols will be notified, and the police will respond.
Do you think that it's helpful for Trinidad and Tobago? I don't know if we have done this before, but an aggressive marketing campaign of 0 deaths from domestic violence this year, and get everybody on board in terms of even victims going into the school system as part of a coordinated effort, speaking to children, speaking to the issue of violence, the issue of conflict management, and just focus it very aggressively for a year. I'm using the word aggressively in a circumstance where you really don't want to use it, but you know what I mean. That you focus, that the country unites. Do you think that something like that would be helpful?
Definitely. And even at the TTPS level, we have done a lot of outreach programs, and we try to, conduct these outreach programs to churches, schools, universities, communities, different groups request us, and we come in and we educate persons. Once you keep that narrative alive and let people understand, here's what, we are not going to accept domestic violence, and people in the community who are involved in domestic violence, we are going to call you out, we are going to make reports, we are going to get the police involved. Once we develop that attitude towards domestic violence, it will, sort of loosen that act.
Well, speaking of that, ASP guy, do you get the sense that persons understand that verbal and emotional abuse is also domestic violence? Because very often it's only when somebody gets physical that reports are made.
And you are correct. And let me tell you something. It starts with the verbal. It starts with the name calling, right? And even with the amendment of the Domestic Violence Act, they have widened the scope of emotional and psychological violence. And those are things that the magistrate takes into consideration whenever issuing a protection order. Even the scope of what is considered to be domestic relationship. It's no longer just brothers and sisters and husband and wife. It includes also, cohabitants and ex-cohabitants, boyfriend and ex-boyfriends, ex-relationships. So the scope has widened, and I'm telling persons, use what we have in Trinidad and Tobago.
So what's your advice in terms of persons making reports? Because as Richard said earlier, this is a very relationships are complex. Human relationships are complex. So is it that you're suggesting if a person is being verbally or emotionally abused, they make a report?
Make a report. Get law enforcement. Get the police involved early in the relationship. Because let me tell you something. It starts off with like that, and then it ends up physical. And I've seen instances, I have suspected that in some instances, persons who end up to be perpetrators when the reports reach to the police, in the truth and in fact, they may have been victims, before in the relationship, and then they lash out. So now the roles have switched. So I'm saying if you're in a domestic situation and it's verbal, emotional, get law enforcement involved.
Does law enforcement now have a different approach? Because yesterday we had a caller. We had a Wendel fields on from the Fathers Association. And one of the callers indicated that, and this is many years ago to be fair, that he made a report and the police said, boy, be yourself now. Go on, here's a man. You're coming to talk about your wife abusing you. Are the police trained now and responding differently to men making reports and also to report some same-sex relationships?
Yes, police officers are trained. We'll have the 1 or 2 officers in between, and we are working on those. Don't worry. We may have the 1 or 2 in between who are still doing those kind of nonsense. But we have been doing a sensitization throughout the entire TTPS. There is actually a new module that was introduced in the police academy that we call the gender responsive policing. And that module within the police training academy, so you're gonna be having that module from the intake of officers into the organization, and they would have it in the advanced program to sensitize police officers who are already within the organization as well.
And what's the response if an officer, because I've seen reports on social media from persons, particularly in same-sex relationships, who go to the police already trepidatiously about violence in the relationship, and they are greeted by jeers and laughter and snickers. And at that point, they just don't feel to continue the report because they are then subjected to a different kind of abuse by the police because they're being laughed at because of their situation.
And that is so sad because the TTPS is supposed to be a professional organization. I have assisted since the advent of the gender-based violence unit. I have assisted along with my officers, persons of that community. And let me tell you something, they were very happy. They were treated with, a level of respect and dignity and confidentiality. And these people were very happy. I remember one person sticking out to me right now, and we remain friends because, he would have come and his spouse would have assaulted him, and he didn't want to pursue the matter before the courts. But we walk you through the process, and I explained to him about the protection order, and he was able to get the protection order, and we served the protection order. So let me tell you, if persons go to station and officers are not receptive, be it whatever sexual orientation you are, just look at the police officer, look at his chest, look at his to get his regimental number. If you could get a name, that will be good as well, so that you can make a report against that officer for that kind of conduct. We are supposed to be professional.
Do you have the right to ask a police officer for his name and number?
Of course. Even when you call to a police station, a police officer should answer the phone first and foremost. It's not his home. His number, rank, and name, and what station it is, and say good morning or good afternoon. Be courteous. Yeah?
There's also such scenario in the public domain now regarding this, and this is why we spoke to Mr. Fields yesterday. A situation where a man and his ex-partner were in some sort of imbroglio, and the man saw his child being abused on video, and the suggestion is that the response was different for the woman being allegedly involved in abusing the child to what would have occurred with her man. Do you think that the laws are being equally applied to men and women in the cases of abuse?
From where I sit, I would say that it's distributed equally. The law doesn't have a face. DV or violence doesn't have a face. So what we need to do is police officers need to just operate in a professional manner, because that same incident that we spoke about, from the time the video came out, my team and we got into action, and I think the entire TTPS, if I may say, because persons were calling me with information, and as we gathered the information, even Mr. Wendel Fields and all, he called me with information, and that is how we were able to locate persons and commence the investigations.
So you were able to act in an egalitarian manner. Have you had reports, because it's a very touchy subject, about women making reports of being raped even though they are married?
And that's an offense. Not because you feel that you are married to a woman, you can just have sex anytime you feel for it. Consent is critical. And it is critical in and out of the marriage. So even if parties are married, you must have consent in order to proceed with sexual activity, because it can amount to rape.
Can you give us an update? Because I did a report, I think 2 years ago, on sexual assault in Trinidad and Tobago, and the numbers that I saw in the last 15 years was striking to me, were actually disturbing. Is there an increase or a decrease in the number of assaults being reported by women in Trinidad and Tobago?
I don't have that statistics on me, but I can get it for you and pass it back on to you at the moment from our CAPA. Yeah, from our crime and problem analysis area. I can check it for you. But, rape is something that persons, they feel very uncomfortable even coming to the station to make a report. But what I want to tell the public, if you're a victim of rape, we can come to you. You don't necessarily have to come to the station. You can just make the report and we can come to you.
And attempted rape or assault also, I'm presuming, right? Just for clarity.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
ASP guy, would you be willing to take some calls? Because very often the public has questions that we may not have thought of, and you are answering the question so brilliantly this morning because you have the information that they may want to interface with you. Would you be willing to take some calls?
Of course, I have no
Thank you.
problem with that.
Numbers
All
are
right, so
safe.
we can take some calls at this point. 222 talk 222-8255 612-8255. North Americans, of course, you can also enter the conversation, and you have a toll-free number at 866-525-1099. And of course, people on the app or the web, you can send your messages.
Have you, and I know you may not have the numbers on you, but are you willing to, would you be able to, to give us a sense of if there has been a stabilization and a reversal of the trend of domestic violence reports during the pandemic? Because very often around the world we saw evidence that there were increases in domestic violence because people were crammed into living spaces when lockdowns occurred. Has that changed? Has that reversed from your information?
Well, when we look at 2020 and we had compared the statistics from, let's say, 2019, 2018, there was an increase. But the thing about it is that we had several things happening in Trinidad. The formation of the gender-based violence unit with these new officers who were highly trained and who, with the new approach to domestic violence. Then we also had the pandemic as well. So as it is from where I sit, I cannot say whether one or the other caused it, or it may be a marrying of the two, the pandemic as well as the formation of the unit that alluded to the increase in domestic violence in 2020.
I think we have a call on the line.
We do
Yeah,
indeed.
good morning,
Let's start
caller.
this call. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
A very interesting program, sir.
Thank you.
First, I have one comment and then I have a question. It always seems as though when the man is the victim, hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it always seems as though when the man is the victim, it is treated slightly as well. He is a man, he can handle it. But when the woman is the victim, everybody rushes to her aid. When a man is a victim, how does he go about the process of bringing the perpetrator to justice? An example, a woman comes to your house, verbally abuses you, destroys your house property, destroys the furniture and so on. How does a man go about initiating this process of bringing the perpetrator to justice?
That's clear, but I'm assuming that they're in a relationship, and this is the outcome of the relationship.
Yeah.
ASP guy, do you want to take that?
Of course, and I'm so happy to take that call because I want to encourage men. Listen to me. You have a listening ear just as a female. It doesn't matter your sex. Make your report and the matters will be investigated. Scenarios that he just explained, we have had to investigate those matters. And the female who was the offender is actually before the court for malicious damage, for assault by beating. So we don't treat a report differently if it's a male or if it's a female. Remember the name of the training that I spoke about in the academy, gender responsive policing. In that stance, it doesn't matter your gender.
Is there
So
a
the
number
TTPS is prepared.
the person can call to get this thing started?
I think he's asking ASP guy whether they can make the report via the phone, etc., that the police will come to them to make the report, to take the report.
Of course. Once a report is made and you're not, let us say you're not comfortable coming to the station, we can come out to you. We can come out to you and take the report. We can have the malicious damage that is done. We can have that photographed as evidence. You would give us a value of the total damage conducted so that we would know what charges to be laid. If you were assaulted, you would have to seek medical attention, and that kind of thing. We can come to you and take the report and record the statement. We have done those things. Some persons are comfortable sitting in their homes for us to record the statements. That is what we do. We would meet you.
Thank you, caller. All right.
Is the online reporting
612-8255. Toll free North America, 866-525-1099. Richard?
is the online reporting system still active?
Very active. Very, very active. The online reporting, the TTPS app, I would encourage persons to download the TTPS app. There's a SOS button if you're in an emergency situation where you can activate that button, that SOS button on the app, and the police can locate you. You know, there are different mediums you can make your report.
Because I did look at that app at one point, and I think as Trinidadians and Tobagonians, we just wonder, maybe wrongfully so, ASP guy.
Is it actually working?
Does it actually work? That if I'm in a situation and I press that SOS button, is it going to work? And if it is that you're going to tell me, yes, it actually works, does the TTPS need to do some marketing of the features of that app for the security of the citizens so that more and more people download it?
Well, the TTPS advertise that app a lot, and they also, on the TTPS Facebook page, they have how the SOS button operates.
Okay.
So we could just continue to market and to, edify the public about it and encourage persons to download the app.
I was going to say something, but I'll get in trouble. I was going to say, well, the TTPS has the time to market some different things these days, but I'll leave that alone. ASP guy Alleyne, and this is a very serious question. Let me just drop the joviality. What happens if someone calls and the alleged perpetrator of domestic violence or abuse is a police officer? Because very often I've heard the reports that, well, the person, if it's an officer, would say, you're wasting your time in, it's my batch and them there. Don't bother to call because they ain't going to do nothing. What happens in a case like that?
Yep.
I'm happy. I love that question. It doesn't matter who is the offender. It doesn't matter your stage in life.
Well, I hear you on that, but I could understand because I know of a scenario where, and I won't call the name, but an officer is married, because they're still married, to a friend of mine, and she'd been abused for years, including he would take out the gun and put it on the kitchen counter and say, try leaving. And that's all. And she got up a morning, and this is many years ago, so they had an argument, and she got up a morning and saw a bullet in her plate. And she endured that for years, and she was afraid to call because he was telling her, it's going to go nowhere because I am an officer and them is my batch. So I understand that it's supposed to be an equal treatment, but that is not the perception in the public domain.
Mm-hmm. And you're correct. You are correct. We have had instances where persons will call in, make reports and say, I know nothing would happen because my husband knows police officers as well. Let me tell you something. Once a report is made, we take no sides. We investigate the matter, and once there's evidence, the matter goes before the court. We have charged soldiers. We have charged police. We have charged prison officers.
And that's great, but you would imagine that someone who's in a relationship with an officer and knows the officer has an issued firearm is in a different kind of danger if the report is made and not acted upon immediately.
Yeah. I suppose what Paul is referencing, ASP, is the issue of maybe a separate workflow in terms of how domestic violence cases from members of the service are handled vis-a-vis members of the regular public because of the urgency and because of the issue of that person may have a firearm.
And they may not be precepted.
Yeah.
Listen. The thing about it is this. You see, when you start to operate differently with different people, you don't operate fairly. The point is we have civilians who are firearm holders as well. So we have a policy. Once a report is made and a firearm is involved, that report will be treated with some degree of with expediency. For example, we have to, seize the firearm, lodge the firearm, because the firearm is there. The person would have used the firearm for part of the report. So even you putting a firearm down in a room and you're not pointing it to the victim, that is what we call common assault. That is a really, really serious crime. And once the report is made, the firearm will be seized, statements will be recorded, the scene will be photographed. It's the normal process.
I hear you, but I still think the because
workflow needs to be different.
because a civilian who's a legal firearm user is still a different person to a police officer that a person has to deal with, and they are,
and
as Paul suggesting, saying you could go and report it because you're saying report, but they could go to make the report and the report never goes any further. They may have actually made a report, but the report is not actioned upon because of the human relationships involved, especially if it's their batch. So I'm saying, should there be a separate workflow for dealing with reports on police officers in a domestic violence situation that goes to a particular number, for example, and a particular separate reporting process, because you understand that there are certain difficulties that may occur?
And I mean, just add to that before you answer, ASP Guy Alleyne, because very often you could understand, and I'm not saying this is what happens, but it could happen. The report goes in and somebody calls and say, hey, your wife make a report on your boy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a possibility, and then a different kind of outcome, unfortunately, occurs. And that's not unthinkable.
I hear you all, but we just have to treat every report the same way, with urgency. If a firearm or weapon is involved, the police has to respond immediately, seize that weapon. So whether it's a civilian, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a prison officer, it doesn't matter. The same steps must be taken. So I encourage persons, do not study and do not let anybody tell you that is my batch and I have a lot of friends in that station. Go to another station and make the report. We have a one-door policy. Make a phone call. Don't let people instill fear in you and prevent you from making your report.
And,
I think
those reports?
ASP Guy Alleyne, I think you being a police officer, you're not understanding how regular citizens
perceive officers with
perceive that situation.
Yeah,
I understand you putting on the blind hat that all should be equal and all reports should be treated equally, regardless of the people involved. But that's not going to be the sense that citizens have when they're dealing.
Right. Sometimes when matters involve police officers, sometimes we find out where the police officer works. We speak with their senior. You understand? So sometimes we don't have a case where somebody is hiding, because we will speak to your seniors. We will get your seniors involved as well.
Well, I hope
I want persons to
let me
feel
put it that way.
comfortable to come.
Are you getting? Is your unit also responsible for the issues related to children, right, and child abuse?
Yes, child
abuse. Are people making more reports, because the definition of child abuse has evolved over the years, and fortunately people understand more what is child abuse. May have been considered discipline before, but maybe child abuse and the statutes now, and people understanding more what encompasses child abuse, you think?
I don't think parents and caregivers understand the seriousness of child abuse. For example, I'm seeing within the last couple of weeks, you're seeing a lot of videos of children being physically assaulted by, parents, and that is something we need to stop. Why everything you want to tape? You're embarrassing these children. Physical assault.
But that
isn't
can't
it even
stop.
a good thing, because we
That
find
can't
out
stop
about it?
well, ASP Guy, that can't stop unless the law makes it very clear that parents cannot discipline their children by hitting them. The law allows it now and uses the word reasonable.
Correct, you're correct.
Which is ridiculous. And it may be unpopular because because we have grown up in a Caribbean environment, and we understand, because we have all gone through it, parents feel the need that if they have to, they can slap you and they can hit you. And that has been a part of our cultural experience, which is why legislators left the word reasonable. But from the time you get into the word reasonable, there are some parents are going to say, well, it was reasonable.
Well, let me ask a question based on that. Do you consider ASP Guy Allen that a parent, although upset and she has the right to be, that the child disappeared for a couple of days, a minor, to tape the child being beaten with a Bible for an extended period, which is a video I saw recently, does that constitute abuse in your view as an officer?
Of course, that is not reasonable. That is not reasonable at all. Beating children with weapons, because from the time you pick up something and you start to use it to hit someone, you turn that good thing, because the Bible is a good thing. You turn that good thing into a weapon as far as I'm concerned. Persons use bamboo, persons use PVC pipe. Those things are not reasonable.
Well, it's that same Bible that they quote, It's that same Bible they quote.
As Richard said,
spare the rod and spoil the child. It's that same Bible they quote.
In a Caribbean environment will say, I discipline my child. It's my child, and I discipline my child how I want.
Exactly. And they use that biblical quote.
Well, when the police investigate and we take the matter to the court will decide if it's reasonable or not.
I guess.
But we have a legislator among us, so maybe he could bring it up.
I not in the court, I in the other court. I in the court that is make the law.
You're still part of the legislative process.
I not in the court that applies or interprets the law. ASP Guy Allen, is there something in closing you'd like to share with us? And I really want to appreciate it, because every time I've interfaced with you, you have been forthright, and I can hear your passion for this division, and I really want to commend that.
Thank you. You know,
what do you want to tell the population, particularly people in situations?
Yeah, what I want to tell the population is this. Hear what? You know, if you are in a domestic situation, you know, seek help. Even if it starts off with just emotional and psychological abuse, the name calling, you know, just seek help. There is help out here. There are different agencies, the TTPS. We have the Families in Action. We have different NGOs, you know, where help can be sought. One thing I want us to, you know, from today, try to tell ourselves violence is not the answer to any conflict. Let us sit as responsible persons, and I say persons, I don't want to say adults only, because children have conflicts as well. Let us...
Okay, thank you, Steve.
I didn't touch your phone.
I was going to ask if she thinks Will Smith...
No, that her back quickly.
I was going to ask if she thought Will Smith should have been arrested, you know, and she got cut off. Or there was no domestic situation.
Well, you need the victim to testify to her.
But when the evidence around the world?
But the victim has to be willing to press the charges.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Seek help is the word from ASP Guy Allen. She's always been very, you can hear the passion, and she's always committed to the cause. That's why she's...
Yes, but technology indeed.
Yes, technology.
All right. What I wanted to ask one final question, just take a couple of seconds, and it really is to deal with elder abuse, may it be at a person's home or at an aged home. How can an elder get in touch with the TTPS if they have no access to a telephone or it's being removed from them? How can that work? Because I'm sure there are elders out there that are in situations but have no means really of trying to contact the police. I mean, I know it's how can that happen, but I don't know how you want to answer that.
Yes, because we have had instances like that. What we have happening is that, let me tell you, there are good people out here still. And remember, there are other persons working in the home. So we have had even home managers making reports of elder abuse in different homes, and the police will get in there and investigate the matter.
And what about on a private home? I know that's a tough one to answer.
Even if it's a private home as well, we have had employees of the home, you know, contact the police anonymously. I
think he means like a residence.
Like a residence, you know,
you need somebody from the residence, or you need a neighbor to really echo something.
Yeah.
Because the police will not know, they will have no sense of knowledge that something is taking place unless a report is made.
Yes, and we have had instances where neighbors make reports and we investigate the matter.
Yeah. All
You
right.
know?
All right. Well, ASP Guy Alleyne, I want to thank you so much. Claire Guy Alleyne, I should say. Thank you so much
Yes.
for being on the Power Breakfast show this morning on Power 102 Digital. Appreciate the conversation with you this morning.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. And let us keep the conversation alive.
Indeed. All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay, then have a good day.
All the best to you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, gentlemen. I got to run into our major
Recording
news.
stopped.
News brief. Thank you, Dorothy. Let's get into our news brief. All courtesy, Champlain Services.
This is your news bulletin from Power 102 Digital.
The TTPS says it is not seeing a drastic increase in domestic violence reports. However, ASP Claire Guy Alleyne